Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm happy to be here, and I am your host, Teri Barr. Question to start out once again today. Have you thought about your bank as being socially conscious? What a terrific question right now. And what do you think this actually means when you think socially conscious and your bank? All right. We are lucky to have Chanelle Bessette, banking expert with NerdWallet, joining us today. She's going to help us break this all down and then tell us why this is becoming such an important topic and where you can get all the information you need. Chanelle, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, what does it mean? Kind of the question I just asked. What does it mean to be socially conscious when it comes to making financial decisions?
It can mean so many different things and different things to different people. Some of the biggest categories that you might think of when you think of social responsibility are commitments to community or kind of just ethical investing. For banks that care about the climate, maybe it's about making sure that money that comes into the bank isn't going towards fossil fuel production or development. And then there's also considerations like LGBTQ or minority issues, where basically the bank is committing to helping these unique communities get what they need from their finances.
That's interesting. So you can actually find a bank that may care about the same topic, the same cause that you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many niche financial institutions out there
Right.
these days that support those kinds of social, environmental, conscious kind of in investments and products for consumers. And you can even find them specifically for the different kinds of social responsibilities that you care about.
Right. Okay. So here's something I find interesting. I think we kind of forget about this. The banks actually use our money. Okay. So maybe we have a checking account or a savings account. The bank then uses it to loan to other businesses and other people, whatever homeowners or whatever the case may be. So, okay, maybe we don't think about who the bank is supporting with our money, but with the descriptions of the different ideas of what we may want to support, should we be thinking about what our bank is supporting?
Yes, definitely. Yes, you bring up a really good point. Uh, it's not always obvious where your money is going once you put it in your bank account. You might
Yeah.
think, oh, at the very worst, I'm neutral, like my money isn't doing anything. But really, your bank, especially if it's a large bank with lots of assets behind it, can take that money and make sizable investments into industries or companies that you might not necessarily agree with the mission of. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, oil pipelines or fossil fuels or deforestation, or if you have issues with weapons manufacturers, like all those kinds of businesses could potentially be being funded by your bank without you necessarily seeing that clearly. And it can be hard to know exactly where that money is going unless you're really poring over the data that the bank might release in like a quarterly report. So things like that are not immediately obvious. And so yeah, but your money could absolutely be ending up somewhere that you might not intend it to.
This is so interesting because it is a time where people are trying to be more careful with their money. This seems to have that feeling that it could go right along with being cautious with your money and then also having it be with a socially conscious bank. I like that a lot. How do we find then these positive impact banks? The ones that really do, as we like to say, walk the walk.
Yeah, so a really great thing to look into is whether that bank has any particular certifications or organizations that it's a part of.
Okay.
So, for example, if a bank is B Corp certified, that typically means they have to meet certain requirements and standards for the way that they operate and the kinds of investments that they make. There's also things like 1% for the planet, where a business might donate 1% of their profits or revenue towards environmentally friendly causes.
Ah.
There's also the Global Banking Alliance on Values, which is an organization of banks that come together and set standards for each other and like make commitments to the kinds of investments and products that they want to offer. And then even beyond that, doing a good old Google search with your bank and different keywords around the different topics that you care about can actually yield quite a few additional results, perhaps from watchdog organizations or just concerned citizens who want to maybe write blogs about the bank. So
Oh,
you can
wow.
sort of take a view of all of those different factors and get more of a holistic view of what your bank is up to.
Absolutely. Okay, so say you want to maybe find out, find a bank that is maybe interested in knowing that you support women, and so the bank supports women-owned businesses, or maybe the environment. I know those are very broad topics, but it is possible to find this information. It sounds like, and obviously you can find so it matches your specific interest.
Yeah. The great thing is that if a bank really is committed to furthering certain socially responsible agendas, then they're usually pretty proud of that. And they want to make sure that all their consumers know what they're doing. They might release reports based on how much money they've donated to certain causes, or they might make sure their marketing really highlights something like, we support women-owned businesses, or we support minority communities, or we support the environment. And these are all the specific ways that we're doing that. But of course, you do have to keep an eye out for greenwashing in these kinds of instances also.
Okay, so I've heard this term tossed around before. What does greenwashing actually mean for people who don't know?
Yeah, it's basically when a business, such as a bank in this case, makes it seem like they're doing more than they perhaps truly are, or maybe they're trying to make their impact seem larger than it perhaps is or could be. A good example of this is if a bank, for example, says, "Oh, we only release debit cards that are made from recycled plastic," which is, it's not nothing. Like, that's not a terrible thing to offer, but it could be just a very small thing that they, compared to what they could be doing. Like, they could make larger commitments to not doing certain investments or to donating more money, things like that. So if a bank is saying like, "Oh, we're eco-conscious or we're eco-friendly," those terms aren't regulated. So it's really important to make sure there's actually something behind those words.
It feels like one of the first really significant times we're talking about things like this related to our banking choices. This has to feel pretty good to give people that opportunity to be part of making their choice based on something they really care about.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot more awareness in general about the responsibilities we all have as consumers and where we're spending our money, where we're putting our money, the kind of even where we're putting our attention, because our attention these days equals money to businesses. And there's a lot of power in collective change. And, we're definitely seeing the numbers support that people are more interested in socially responsible financial decisions than they perhaps have been in the past.
Well, you have been doing so much research on this whole idea of socially responsible banking, and you have a new hub with NerdWallet that's coming out. We'll tell you about that in just a moment. But I guess I really want to ask you, what do you feel like you learned from all of this?
So for me, it was more about learning about how the whole system works. Like I mentioned, the idea of banks being able to use your money behind the scenes. As
Yeah.
personally, I keep my head in this kind of work all day, but even for me, this is only a recent realization that your money can be used for lots of things that you might not necessarily agree with or support, just depending on where you're keeping it. So for me, I've really been trying to give time and attention and word count in articles to banks that are doing things that we find really supportive. And my colleagues are working on that as well. Like, we have some great roundups now of banks that we've researched as socially responsible for lots of different reasons, whether that's minority supported community, like minority run businesses that support those communities, or just kind of banks that have made pledges to not invest in certain industries.
Oh, that's terrific. And there is this recent survey, and it shows more than 60% of Americans would actually like to work with a bank that is socially conscious. Did that surprise you?
It didn't surprise me that people are interested. Like, I
Okay.
definitely think the world is shifting that way. I think we're evaluating a lot of existing structures in terms of money and power, and trying to
Hmm.
see where we can make a difference and make a change for the better. And I think it just shows that there's a lot of potential for growth here, and there's a lot of interest. And, it's no small thing to switch over your bank or to close out an old account. Like that can have a lot of, it could just be a bit of pain to do, having to change over a lot of your payments or your direct deposits or, lose a long-term customer relationship with a bank. So it's not something I expect people to do willy-nilly, but it is something that could make a really big difference if enough people do it.
Oh, I love it. And don't be afraid to ask questions, right? I think sometimes we just take what we're given when it comes to banking institutions and maybe get in there and find out a little bit more about the bank you want to use.
Yeah, and there are so many different options out there these days with neobanks and online banks and community focused banks. There's just so many different financial institutions you could go with, and the banks know that, and I think they want to be more competitive and they want to align themselves with what consumers care about. So I think that just shows that the industry is continuing to change, and there could just be way more opportunity for positive social impact in the future.
For everybody, it sounds like. All right, for the listeners, if you want to learn more about this, you can take a deep dive, and it's really an interesting read. Socially Conscious Finance Hub is on nerdwallet.com. And of course, we're also going to share the link in our show notes for you. Super easy to Google as well. Anything else, Chanelle, that you want to mention that I may have missed?
Yeah, the hub is really fantastic, especially if you're just getting started with your research. We really tried to deep dive into a lot of the best options out there currently. Also, our hub features not only banking, but also investing information and advice about ethical portfolios that you can build and investments you can look into. So my colleagues on the investing team did a really great job with their content as well.
It really feels like it could be a win-win as we move forward with this idea.
Yeah. And it's, research is the first step. So I'd really encourage people to look into it.
Excellent. Chanelle Bessette with NerdWallet. She is a banking expert. And thanks for sharing all that terrific information. Some things we just don't think about, but I think we're finding are very important to actually consider these days. Thanks, Chanelle.
Thanks, Teri.
Yeah, and I'm Teri Barr. I am your host of the PennyWise Podcast from Lee Enterprises, and we will talk with you again next time.